Now we're going to begin part 2 of our lesson analyzing a visual text, comparison and contrast. In part 1, we analyzed this photo from the Great Depression. In part 2, we're going to analyze this photo from the Dust Bowl. And I chose these two images because in 9th grade English, we will read To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, and the story is set during the Great Depression. I wanted to give you a backdrop of what the setting was from our story by beginning with analyzing two visual texts. This lesson is going to ask us to analyze this photo from the Dust Bowl. And the first thing that you need to consider when you're analyzing a visual image is the details. And when you look at the details, remember to look at the nouns, the verbs, the adjectives, and the adverbs. And what I mean by that is the nouns. Look at the people, the places, the things, the ideas. What are the actions that these people and things are doing? Describe them with adjectives, and then describe their actions with adverbs. For example, the women in the picture. Look at what they're doing. They are in a tent, which is their shelter. They are accompanied by at least 2 children and an infant. And if you look behind, you can see that there is desolation. Everything looks dead and dry. And then right here in front, I notice a trunk, as if these women were traveling at one point. And then to describe these women and the children, they look tired and weary. It looks like, when judging from their tent, that this is a distressed area. I look at the desolation in the back. This woman looks very distressed in the front. And then they're basically unsheltered because this tent only has 3 sides and half of a roof, I guess. So they're unsheltered. And it looks as if their actions are, this woman is holding a baby. And I want you to notice that she's kind of leaning away from the camera. So it looks as if she's holding the baby cautiously. This woman is slumping over in the chair as if she's weary and tired. And then in the back, these children seem to be looking at the photographer very curiously. Now remember that when you are analyzing a photo, you look from corner to corner and then all around. Look deep, considering the nouns, the verbs, the adjectives, and the adverbs. Who is in the photo? What is in the photo? What are their actions? Describe what they look like. How are their actions appearing? The next thing to think about when you're analyzing an image is the labels. Now this photo doesn't have any explicit labels where it says, you know, these people are from Utah, or they're Americans, or they're wearing branded clothing. We're going to have to make some inferences from the photo in order to label them. And one of the inferences that I make is that this is a mother. She's holding an infant. I don't know for sure if this is a mother, but I might want to assume that. So that's a label. These are children, obviously, because they're younger than the 2 ladies. Another label is that, judging that this is a mom and this is a mom, and we have children, there is probably a family involved. And judging by their shelter and then their lack of possessions, this is the only thing I see that they maybe own, they look poor. And since this is their shelter, I would label them as possibly homeless. Judging by the trunk in the front, it looks as if they are travelers. And then I look around at what's behind them here, and I think they must be in a pretty desperate situation. So that is how I would label this photo. Next thing to consider is that when this photographer took this photo, he had a specific audience in mind. Now, you might not know the photographer and you might not know the audience, but looking at the photo, you can make some assumptions. I'm going to assume that this family could not afford a camera and take this photo. So I'm going to dismiss the idea that their family took this photo. What I want to assume is that possibly this was a photo taken with a newspaper in mind, and the audience being the public, because it's going to go in a newspaper. Or possibly it was a government official who was just traveling around to show the government what was going on across the country during the Dust Bowl. And what assumptions did I make to draw the conclusion that my audience was the public through the newspaper or a government official? Is that possibly this was a newspaper photographer who wanted to document what was going on in the country during the Great Depression. Or it could have been a government official who was asked to go out and see what happened during the Dust Bowl. And those are some things that I had to assume. The next thing to think about when analyzing an image is precedent. What came before this photo that caused the actions happening in this photo? And we know that the precedent in this case was the Dust Bowl, which happened during the Great Depression and World War II. Now, these effects caused hunger. These people don't look like they have a kitchen or much food, and there's not much going on around them. What I would see as the possibility of maybe fishing for their food or hunting for their food. It's pretty desolate. So the effect of these three events would be hunger. The effect is that these people are obviously homeless, as close as you can get to homeless. They look helpless, especially this woman. She looks like she's very weary. And I might assume that the effect of this was abandoned families. I don't see a dad in any of this photo. So either dad is out looking for more work or looking for more food, or this family has been abandoned completely. And these three events also caused what looks to be despair. You can see the despair in the eyes of this lady. The next thing to think about is shared values. And when a photographer takes a photo, he is appealing to you, the viewer, especially in shared values. For example, one thing that you might share in common with this photo is that this appears to be a family with a mother and children. You are someone's child. I am someone's mother. We all have families. Therefore, that's a shared value of ours: mother, children, family. Another shared value is maybe you've been traveling before and you know how weary and tired you can get from traveling, and how desperate you can become when you can't find the food or shelter you need while traveling. Another shared value is home. This is their home. All of us have a home, so we share that value, and this would be a pretty sad situation for us to have as a home. And so maybe that's what the photographer is trying to appeal to us, to show us that this is not a good definition of home. We've all had times of hunger and weariness, maybe not to the extent of these ladies, but we can relate to that shared value of being hungry or weary or tired. Things to also consider are, what are some comparisons being made in the photo? And there aren't any direct comparisons, but we can make some inferences and come up with some indirect comparisons. So let's think about that. Home, which would be a nice, sheltered, solid wood home, as opposed to homelessness, which is just, in this case, a tent. Another comparison might be the family dynamics. There's not a dad here, so that's a comparison. Dad off at work, or dad having gone away forever. Another comparison could be the missing father. So those are just some inferences that we made about what the comparisons in the photo could be. The next thing to think about is, what was the purpose of this photo? Why did this photographer take this photo? The first thing I think of is that it could have been taken to show the destruction of the event of the Dust Bowl. Maybe it was taken to appeal for help for these people involved. And then also maybe it was taken just to simply document how this affected the families involved. And then from that, let's write an assertion. Now this assertion is going to be a little different from the one we wrote in the last lesson. But write an assertion. This image was captured to show the destruction of the Dust Bowl in an effort to memorialize the destruction and helplessness of the families affected by the disaster. The image persuades the viewer to feel sympathy for the families because it is clear to see that the people in the photo are suffering. The suffering is evident by the weariness of the lady in the rocking chair. The helplessness is evident when one looks closely at the shelter for these children, which is obviously unstable and unfit. Now think about the things that I underlined as I was reading that assertion. And remember that when you're looking at a photo, just like a writing, there is a specific appeal. And it seems like the appeal in this photo would be to your pathos or your emotions, because you feel sympathy. You feel that they are suffering. You understand what it feels like to be weary and helpless. And then you also could feel what it would be like to live in an unstable and unfit shelter. And keep those things in mind, because in the next lesson we're going to discuss how text appeals to the viewer or the reader. And this concludes lesson 2 of our analyzing a visual text.